Animals are heroic by nature. Heroism, defined as placing yourself in danger to protect helpless others from harm, has been documented in ants, rats, dogs, and elephants. And a good example of this was recently captured on traffic surveillance video in Chile when a dog was trying to cross a busy highway and was struck and lie helpless in traffic. And another dog, seeing him in distress lying there, jumped out into the traffic and slowly pulled him step by step to the side of the road and saved him. We humans have a great capacity for heroic action, but we're also unique in another way, in that never in the animal kingdom has a heroic actor ever returned to the herd and been shunned, grazing privileges revoked, and been subject to emotional and physical harm. That is a treatment for heroic individuals that is reserved for human heroes known as whistleblowers, who we term betrayers, double-crossers, snitch, squealers, and tattletales, and worse, when every study has shown that these individuals are good people sacrificing themselves to do the right thing. How can we reconcile those facts with our treatment of whistleblowers? Now, I can speak on this with some authority after an 11-year ordeal in which I exposed government agency wrongdoing in an event known as the DC Lead in Drinking Water Crisis. Now, the lead crisis, it started out innocently enough when these agencies changed the water treatment to try to make it better by changing a chemical. And this chemical caused lead, unbeknownst to us, to start leaching at hazardous levels into the drinking water of Washington, D.C. And rather than inform the public about this problem so that parents could protect their children, unborn fetus, and even from themselves, the agencies chose to hide this problem from the public for 3 years. And lead, which is the best-known neurotoxin, we've known for thousands of years that it makes the mind give way, was found at very high levels in the water of the U.S. Congress of the United States. So if you've ever wondered why at any given time half our government is insane, there's your answer. It's lead in the water. But unfortunately, the agencies that caused the problem, the policemen that we pay to protect us, they were also given responsibility to assess the harm that was done. And what they did is they wrote 4 fraudulent scientific papers in which they claimed that not a single man, woman, or child had been hurt. Now, I was working on this, and I saw what happened, and with myself and with the team of other individuals, a family, parents in D.C., a congressional committee, we eventually exposed the agency's lies and the harm that they were doing. And as for myself, well, our work was eventually written up in Time Magazine, Prism, Environmental Science and Technology, and the Chronicle of Higher Education. I got awards, a top science paper award from ES&T, a MacArthur Fellowship, and an IEEE Barris Award. And I can tell you this was one of the harder things I'd ever done because I faced threats, my funding was lost, the agencies issued press releases against me, and there was even the case where they spied on me. But I was outraged to learn that there were 5 whistleblowers who worked at these government agencies, either for or at the agencies, who were fired or had to quit for exposing agency corruption or for trying to protect the public from harm. How is it we allow these individuals to be treated in this way? To understand this, we have to understand another uniquely human capability, and that is our capability for self-deception. When my dog looks in the mirror, he sees himself and is quickly bored and is soon off doing something far more enlightening, like smelling someone's butt. But when a human looks in the mirror, oh my, we don't even see ourselves as we are. As Dickens noted about 150 years ago, we see a positive self-image that's generated somewhere in our brain. And on average, we view ourselves as 20% better than we actually are, whether it's our intelligence, how good-looking we are, or how honest we are. And this self-image is very, very important to us. It's important to our success. And usually, it's not only harmless, it's even helpful. For example, the Wall Street Journal recently wrote that self-deception is involved in actually better performance at work, more success, smarter people deceive themselves more. And in athletics, this is actually called championship thinking. If you tell yourself that you're better than you are, your performance will actually be improved. But there's a danger in that this can go too far, to self-delusion, to the point where you are blinded to your weaknesses. And at that point, if anyone forces you to see yourself as you are, you view that as a threat because it might shatter your positive self-image. And as a result, you either look away or you destroy the threat. And this is the key to our treatment of whistleblowers. Proving this is very unpleasant. This is a picture of one of the most shameful episodes in U.S. history in which U.S. troops massacred innocent civilians in a village, My Lai, in Vietnam. And even though this event occurred half a century away, half a world away, it so conflicts with the image that we have of ourselves that I can barely stand to look at it. And consequently, most people are not aware that My Lai was also the site of one of the greatest acts of heroism in American history. Hugh Thompson, who witnessed what was occurring, he turned his guns on his fellow soldiers, and he said if they shot another Vietnamese, he would shoot them. And he didn't stop there. He rescued some of the victims, and he made sure that we learned about what happened in My Lai so that we can improve who we are regardless of what it did to our self-image. And how was he treated? Shamelessly. One congressman threatened him as being the only person worthy of prosecution for what happened at My Lai. And it took us 30 years before we thanked Hugh Thompson for his heroic action. But because of what we learned, in this case and in others, when we were recently faced with another shameful episode in U.S. history, the U.S. government mistreatment of prisoners at Abu Ghraib prison, we did a little bit better. Joe Darby, who turned those pictures in, betraying his friends for a higher ideal, he was surprised that the military supported what he did. It was the rest of us that he had to be worried about and who threatened him. And so there are some positive signs. Time magazine once named whistleblowers Persons of the Year. And just 3 months ago, the U.S. Congress, they had a Whistleblower Appreciation Day. But unfortunately, I can tell you that these positive signs don't extend to science and engineering. The agencies that were involved in the Washington, D.C. lead and drinking water crisis, they learned nothing. No one was held accountable. They even gave themselves gold medal awards for public service. We scientists and engineers, we suffer from self-delusion, too much moral overconfidence. And in fact, we train scientists and engineers to be moral cowards. And so they haven't learned anything, and to this day, the agencies and their minions, they continue to deny and use science to try to cover up the harm that was done. This is a graph from an article that appeared in a peer-reviewed journal about 1 year ago. And my students, when we saw this, we tried to repeat this. We spent 2 person-years of efforts before concluding that this graph was probably a fraud. And when we obtained the data through a Freedom of Information Act request, what we discovered is those lines on this peer-reviewed journal article weren't even data at all. When we grabbed the lines and blew them up, this is what they looked like. Someone had carelessly drawn these lines using Microsoft Draw. And when the people who tried to use science to deceive were asked to explain what happened, these are 3 PhDs in engineering. They put in writing that they didn't know how to make a graph that was bright and colorful enough using Microsoft Excel. So they gave their data to a graphic artist, and this artist made all the erroneous hand-drawn graphs. The graphic artist, who they refused to name, was responsible for all the errors. The original data was destroyed, and the data they did give me actually proved the exact opposite of what they had concluded. So this would be funny, except these 3 authors were also once my best friends. Talk about pushing boundaries. I shared offices with them. I co-authored papers with them. I was co-PI on grants. And I would rather have burns over 10% of my body than to out them in this way. But that was not a choice that I was given. I could either be willfully blind and sustain the self-delusion that scientists and my friends would not do such a thing, or I could allow science and engineering to be abused, to poison innocent children, and I cannot live in a world where science and engineering are used in that way. Nor could these individuals here, who had to be portrayed as the bad guys and laid down their professional lives so that the agencies in Washington, D.C. could sustain the delusional fantasy that they were the good guys, even as they poisoned an entire city. So let's be clear about what's happening here. What we have is a perversion of natural selection, where weak, deceitful cowards survive, and strong, honest, heroic actors are destroyed. And if individuals like this ever do go extinct, I can tell you, given the magnitude of the technological, science, and engineering problems that face us, that our civilization is not going to be far behind. So we all have to do a better job of confronting our self-delusion and supporting whistleblowers. But some of us can go beyond that. We can prepare for the time to do the right thing. We can prepare ourselves and train ourselves to see when we would have been willfully blind. We can act when we would have let fear decide for us. We could change the world, but only if we don't allow the world to change us. We can help create the world we want to live in. Live up to your heroic nature. Do not live and die a complete coward of convenience. Thank you.